On the 13th of July, 1977, at approximately 9:21 p.m., lightning struck 4 times over New York City.
We had severe lightning and thunderstorms in Westchester County, and they knocked out Indian Point 3, which is one of the generating stations.
Lightning strikes hit one after another, targeting some of Con Edison's critical power lines. Within minutes, power lines from neighboring electric companies tripped out, preventing them from supplying much-needed electricity to Con Edison. By 9:41 p.m., all of New York City, except neighborhoods in southern Queens that were powered by the Long Island Lightning Company, was left in the dark.
Dial 911 if you must have an ambulance for suddenly an emergency. I'm advised now that Ed Livingston...
The effects of the blackout were felt immediately. Air conditioners, elevators, lights, and water pumps had stopped. Subways had to be shut down, stranding commuters all over the city. A baseball game between the Mets and Cubs had to be stopped, and the New York City television stations went off the air. Even banks, stock exchanges, and brokerages on Wall Street had to shut down. As if the loss of power throughout most of New York City wasn't bad enough, the people's reaction to the blackout is what makes this story even worse. During the 1970s, the United States entered an economic recession due to an interruption in the supply of foreign oils and rising inflation. New York, one of the states most affected by this economic downturn, was experiencing severe economic difficulties, including high unemployment and financial instability. The city was already facing financial challenges before the 1970s, including high levels of debt and a shrinking tax base. To improve the situation, New York was forced to cut funding for many of the city's services, such as police, fire departments, and public sanitation, which in the end put further pressure on struggling families and individuals that relied on them. As unemployment increased, crimes of desperation began to rise as well. This created a feedback loop where rising crime further strained the already limited resources of the city. Additionally, Son of Sam, or David Berkowitz, was on the loose and active during this period, which made the situation even more dire. The blackout occurred just after many businesses and shops had closed for the day, leaving them particularly vulnerable to looting and vandalism. Chaos quickly spread throughout the city, with widespread looting reported in 31 neighborhoods as people of all ages took advantage of the darkness and confusion. Time magazine described the scene in its July 25, 1977 article as, quote, "Roving bands of determined men, women, and even children wrenched steel shutters and grills from storefronts, shattered plate glass windows, scooped up everything they could carry, and destroyed what they could not. First, they went for clothing, TV sets, jewelry, and liquor. When that was cleaned out, they picked up food, furniture, and drugs." End quote. Looters even managed to steal brand new cars from a showroom in the Bronx by hot-wiring the vehicles after breaking in. Others drove their cars into store entrances or pulled down metal grates to gain access. Ironically, some looters found themselves being robbed of their stolen goods by others in the chaotic streets. Arson also swept the city as firefighters responded to over 1,000 fires, 6 times the normal number, and 1,700 false alarms in a single night. Buildings and vehicles were set ablaze, and some fires were deliberately ignited to divert emergency responders away from other crimes. When firefighters arrived on the scene, they were met with hostility, with crowds throwing rocks, bottles, and debris at them. Police Sergeant Robert Murphy, who was responding to the blackout, stated, quote, "You grab 4 or 5, and 100 take their place. We come to a scene, and people who aren't looting whistle to warn the others. All we can do is chase people away from a store, and they just run to the next block, to the next store." Power began to return the next morning, but the damage had already been done. At 7 a.m. on July 14th, a section of Queens became the first area to get power back, followed by parts of Manhattan later that day. By 10:39 p.m., full power was finally restored to the entire city. In the end, a congressional study estimated that the cost of damages amounted to a little over $300 million, which, at today's rate, amounted to about $1.5 billion. The city lost about $4 million in tax revenue and had to pay $5 million in overtime to policemen and firemen. In total, 4 people died, over 1,600 stores were damaged, more than 1,300 looted and 45 were set on fire, with the Crown Heights and Bushwick neighborhoods in Brooklyn being hit the hardest. Most of these losses could be recovered once banks, brokerages, and other businesses reopened. However, the more significant costs are immeasurable. As with many big city riots, the primary victims of the blackout were those living in already devastated neighborhoods, who had nowhere else to go. As Time magazine stated in its July 25, 1977 article, quote, "No amount of money can compensate the looters for what they have lost," end quote.